he was my leaf man, my yard man, and did a good job. We became friends. We were friends for 3 or 4 years, and I was married at the time, and then was divorced and working at a local restaurant bar, and he began to come in there and be friendly and helped me get a washer and dryer and get tires for my car and helped me mow my yard at the new place. And he was just very kind, coming from a bad relationship to someone that actually paid attention and seemed very caring and thoughtful without me having to ask for it. And so it started off very nice. We started dating and dated for about a year, and then I moved into his home, and I lived there for 3 years. After the first year, my daughter was in a bad fire, and I, in the back of my mind, kind of blamed him a little. He was to pick her up from the sitter because I was working that night, and he did not. And the fire happened after I got off work. I met the ambulance in the driveway there. And when we got back from the hospital from her, it was just a few days after that the first physical attack came. We were on the front deck, and I kind of tried to talk to him that I had these feelings and that we needed to talk through them because I didn't understand. And he just he began to degrade me and tell me that I deserved it. Karma's a bitch, and some women just deserve to have children and some don't. And I flung my beer in his face. That's whenever he tried to push me off the top deck. I went into the house, and he threw me into the ground in between the bathroom and the upstairs bedroom and continued to stomp me with his boots. And I called my brother to pick me up, and the first words out of my brother's mouth were, "What did you do?" And so I was gone for 4 days, and I went back. I felt like I had done something. If I had not been aggressive in the things I was saying, and if I had not thrown the beer in his face, if I had just been more accepting of his answers, that I would not have put myself in that situation. And I see now that that is not real. The situation would have always been there no matter how I addressed it. That was the very first incident. After I went back, it was a good 6 months. It was nice. He was friendly again. He was responsive, very thoughtful. He bought me a car, things like that. And jewelry. We got engaged. And then the comments started of, you're just white trash. You don't deserve to have these things. This is why your family doesn't talk to you. This is why you have issues with friends. This is why you move a lot. Because he made me believe that I didn't deserve to have anything that was of any joy or kindness. And then it's about 6 months of that. And then right around Mother's Day, he was upset because there was a sock that had fallen between the washer and dryer, and told me that it was just very white trash of me and to go get it. And when I went to go down the stairs, he kicked me down the stairs. And the following day, I went to my boss and I borrowed money against my paycheck to move out. And I did, and I left. And I was gone. I left in May. I moved 3 times because he found me and would continually harass me at work. If I was at work or if I was out with friends, he would show up where we were and make a big scene. I was too afraid that the protection order was going to cause more problems, that if I just let him move on, that he would leave me alone. I didn't realize at the time that it's his behavior. It was a continued behavior over years before I ever even knew who he was. This had happened prior. And he had protection orders that I did not know about. And until after the fact that it happened to me. And then when he found me the last time, I was living where I live now. And he tapped on the door, and I didn't see him at first. And so I slid the door open. My girlfriend had just left. We had spaghetti dinner. She'd brought me spaghetti. I had a tooth that was going to be pulled the next day. And so I thought she had forgotten something. I come back. So I slid the door open and looked out and did not see her car. But then when I turned back around, he was ducked down behind my recycling bin. And he stood up and grabbed the door handle. And I tried to push the door closed. He grabbed the door, pulled it open, and then chased me through the house, telling me, why won't you just pay attention to me? You know we need to be together. You know that you love me. You know that I'd be good for you. He was trying to put his hands up underneath my shirt, telling me that if I would just have sex with him, then I would remember. I went around the table, pushed the chair in front of him. I went out the front door that was still open. Yep, he pushed me in the back. I tripped and I fell into the neighbor's yard. And then he put his knees into my back and proceeded to pull down my pants. He began to ram his fingers into my vagina. I leaned up as hard as I could and tried to scream. And at that time, he wrapped his hands around and put his fingers in my mouth, pulling my mouth wide open so that I couldn't scream, and I bit down. And when I bit down the first time, he yelled back at me, and then I bit down the second time, and he leaned over my right shoulder and bit my face twice. After that, I'm not sure why, but he got off of my back and just sat on the ground, and I curled into a ball. And he stood up and he kicked me, and I don't remember exactly what he said. And I turned, I rolled, and he kicked me in my back at that time. And then he got up and he left. And as I stood up, he's backing up the hill, and I walked into the house and fell to the ground and dialed 911. I will tell you, first of all, it seemed like a lifetime. It seemed forever, and really I think it was only 16 minutes that I was on that call, which is, being where I live, is a very short time from Morgan County. Once the ambulance got there, I was taken to the hospital. In the hospital, I was petrified. They put me in a back room, and all I kept thinking was, nobody's gonna see him come in and find me in this back room. And it was just a few minutes, and Miss Patty came in with another lady. And the nurses came in, and they started taking the photos, and Patty walked me through, this is what they're doing, and this is why they're doing it. And she stood there, and she calmed me, and she reminded me that these are the things that will make sure that this doesn't happen again from this man to anyone. And it was that calming sense that allowed me to relax enough where I actually rested. I slept for probably an hour after all the doctors and everything left. And Patty was a godsend. She allowed me to take a breath in a moment where I genuinely thought I was going to die. After the hospital, the next day or the day after, I was called into, I believe it's called a written statement. I had to go in and give a written statement on the events of the evening. And in that time, Stephanie had come in and kind of walked me through, this is why we're doing this statement. This is who you're going to be talking to. These are the officers. This is, I think, a detective. There were several different people that I met in that very first moment. And with Stephanie, I messaged her probably 100 times. What does this mean? Why are they doing this? What is this going to be? What are we using this for? And she answered every single question. And if she didn't have the answer within a minute or two, she would tell me, I'll get right back to you. And she never hesitated to it never took long for Stephanie to respond and help me understand the steps of what was going to happen and what was coming next. She was there through one of the hardest times, which was the deposition. That was horrifying. One of the most horrifying things I've ever had to go through was that deposition. And it was just the fact they made me feel like the things in my past somehow lessened the things that he had done, which I was very hurt by. Stephanie was there whenever I couldn't even breathe to walk into the courtroom. She was there beside me. Patty would be there. They would sit on each side of me, letting me know you're okay to be here and you're okay, and we're going to make sure that you're okay. At one point, Stephanie even asked if I wanted an extra officer in the courtroom because I was so petrified of this man. He had nothing to lose. What would stop him from coming across the courtroom to get me? And she made it very safe. She made it very safe. She was very understanding that I didn't understand the way the justice system worked. She was very informative on why the steps we had to take and the time frame those things took, because it did take quite a while. And there were times where I was like, do I do this? It's just taking so long. And she would remind me, there are steps we have to follow to make sure this is done correctly and in the fullest fashion possible. And the knowledge that she brought made it so much easier to walk into that courtroom knowing that I had that knowledge power on my side. And with Patty on one side and Stephanie on the other, I knew that we were unbeatable. The facts don't change. People cannot do this, male or female. This is not acceptable behavior. And those women stood beside me when I couldn't even stand on my own, and they held me up to make sure that I knew that this was going to be okay. And so I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful. It was months, I think, into the actual court proceedings that one lady actually came to the courthouse, and she sat behind me, and I did not know who she was. And I knew that the fella had a new lady, and I was fearful that this woman was going to be aggressive or condescending. And it ended up being another woman that actually had a protection order on him in this local area that wanted to come and apologize that she didn't follow through on hers. And she felt bad that had she followed through, that it may not have happened to me. And I just tried to make her explain her taking those steps protected her, but it took him doing it to me for the stance for him to understand he can't do it anymore. And that it was nothing she could have done to change anything that happened, because she had a really hard time with it. She was struggling with it a lot. And I just tried to reiterate to her that no matter how she handled it, it would have happened. It's just the way it was going to be, and it's just who he is. And I think she left that day feeling a lot better about the choices that she made in her life to move on and how she did it. Because he was a hard fella to get away from. His property is his property. He will seek you out and find you. I don't think he'd ever spent much of his life being told no. And when I did, it was a big deal. He pled out to the 3 charges. They run concurrent. They were 12, 12, and 7, I do believe. And so he will do 12 years. 8 years, he will become eligible for parole. He has to complete a sex offenders course to be able to get that parole. He will have lifetime monitoring after he gets paroled, and even when he's finished with parole, he will still have monitoring for the entirety of his life. It felt, I'm not sure, it felt enlightening. It felt empowering. It felt dismissive. It felt like maybe he might have the opportunity to find the man that he portrayed to be. And yet I still felt bad. My feelings and my heart still broke because I took a stance to say, no, this is not okay. No matter how much it hurts for it to be me sitting here saying, I will not back down, and you will do time and consequences for your actions, your consequences. But it still made me feel bad. It still made me sad, which was hard for me to deal with because I couldn't understand why those emotions were there. And yet, the empowerment of it, to have the judge turn and thank me for being there at every proceeding and never backing down, that was when I felt gratified. I felt like I'd done my part, like my story had been told without saying a word, because I never said a word. He was sentenced in 2021, in July of 2021, right before my birthday. Jesus loves me, great birthday present. It is hard at times, but most days I wake up and I remember that I'm still here for a reason. I still have the power to get up and go to work, even though it took me a couple of years to get past the fear of who's coming, who's mad, who's vengeful, who wants, the revenge for him, because those messages never stop. Those phone calls never stop. But now I have the ability to work with a group of people. My boss is also a survivor. The owner of my business is the responding officer. They know my story. They know that when I go to work, I am fearful of every single person that walks through the door. And yet I still put a smile on and say, hello, love. Because I never know who it is. But I'm still here, and I'm still able to go to work and show everyone that even after the worst thing in your life happens, you put one foot in front of the other, you put your smile on. If you have good friends, you may cry in the bathroom and tell them about it, but you get up and today's a great day. I get to enjoy this day. I get to go eat McDonald's. I get to go swimming. I get to go to concerts, and they are fearful. I just had the opportunity to go see Willie Nelson, and I was so panicked with the amount of people that were around me, and yet to have friends on both sides of me that knew that I was fearful. I enjoyed every minute of it, but it was those first moments I had to walk through, that fear, to take the breath, to say, okay, you have the opportunity, let's take it, let's seize the day, let's grab it and run, and see what greatness we can make. Keep standing tall. Let your light shine. No matter how dim someone tried to make it, let it shine.
I am Patty Martin, and I work with Citizens Against Domestic Violence. I am a sexual assault victim advocate, and oftentimes we are called to the hospital, and we do work with victims of sexual assault in shelter and also out in the community. So whenever the hospital gets a sexual assault or a domestic violence victim in for a forensic exam, they call CADV, and we send out an advocate so that an advocate can be there with that assault victim. So I went to the hospital and I met Alyssa for the first time. I could tell that she was scared and she was confused, and it was, I really, really like being able to go to the hospital when I can so that I can help comfort that victim of sexual assault. So I remember Alyssa, I remember that she had, marks on her face. She had a bite mark, which we know that bite marks and sexual assault is very personal, and my heart went out to her. My heart goes out to all victims anytime I have to go to the hospital, but I could tell that was a very personal crime, very, very personal, and reached out into the core of her being. And so just making sure that I could comfort her in any way possible. And that was really just the start of our journey. She was traumatized, and she was scared, and she was confused. In our industry, we call that trauma brain, but it's really that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn where something happens, and it's kind of a shock to the body, and so she was scared, she was confused, and it was really nice to be able to just comfort her and just be there in the moment. And I think that's one of the most important parts of advocacy. We're just there. We're there to to provide that emotional support that they need. So a few days later, she had applied for an order of protection, and that was, I believe, one of the first court processes in which she saw her abuser. And I remember very clearly that she was shaking and she was crying and she did not want to see him. She knew that he was going to be brought out from the door in the back of the courtroom, from the jail, and she was just extremely apprehensive of that moment. And really, that is a very normal response that we see in the courtroom. So to have somebody get ready for the court process, we really try to go through mindfulness, like, are there things in the courtroom that you can look at? Because you don't have to look at your abuser. You do not have to give him that power over you. You get to decide on something else that might take your mind off of what's getting ready to occur a little bit, as much as you can. So mindfulness, like, what do you see? What do you hear? I remind victims to breathe. I know that with Elissa, it was like making sure that she had Kleenex, making sure that she knew that it was gonna be okay, that we were there and that we were gonna get through this. And even though it was really hard and very difficult for her to get through that process, she was gonna make it. And I was gonna be there every step of the way. A lot of times when there is an order of protection hearing such as Elissa's, they will wait until later in the morning to address that when the court is cleared out a little bit, so that not everybody is listening to her story. So that is beneficial for her as far as not having so many people, so many ears listening, but at the same time, it's making her wait. And waiting sometimes is so hard for someone who is trying to get that order of protection or go through the criminal process. It can be very daunting. Court is kind of scary anyway, and when you're looking at the victim of something so personal as to get a bite mark, as to get a sexual assault, it's so personal and it's very scary. So really talking about, you don't have to look at him. He's going to come through that door and you can look anywhere else. You can answer the judge. You can answer anybody else. You do not have to answer him. So she got through that first court process, and then I think within a couple weeks there was criminal proceedings. And every time she showed up, she was a little more comfortable with the process. That first court appearance with the order of protection that I was with her was really, really scary for her. But every time she showed up, she was more and more brave, and I just saw this growth in her. She could do this, and really seeing her come from victim to survivor. And I think that is probably one of the most rewarding parts of being an advocate, is you get to see that journey. You get to be part of that, even if it's just for a little bit. You get to see the growth of a person, and you get to see them overcome some of those fears. And she was finally able to look at him and say, that's okay, he's gonna go to prison. So that was really important for her. It was important for all of us sitting around her. I do remember Stephanie from Morgan County Prosecutor's Office and I would sit on either side, but she also had family support that would sit behind her. And she had people just around her who we're not going to go anywhere. They really provided some support for her, and that is so important going through this process. I think sometimes survivors don't continue because they don't feel like they have that support from wherever that might come from.
So I'm Stephanie Robertson. I am the victim advocate for Morgan County Prosecutor's Office, and I met Alyssa. She'd come in for a protection order, and I met her shortly after that. She was scared, as well. You know, I would be expected. We sat down. We went through the process. The criminal justice process is slow and steady, and it's very confusing because there's a lot of things that go on. But I think the main thing that we focus on right from the beginning is there's going to be some things that's going to start. We're going to have an arraignment. He's going to have a bond hearing. And that's really gets people kind of tense because they're like, is he going to get out? Are they going to let this guy out? Is he going to be able to bond? And I kind of explain the importance of the victims being there to tell their side, tell the judge why, you know, they want him to stay in jail. And it's very difficult, especially to be able to stand up there in front of the judge and go, this is why I believe. The judge has to look at several different factors when it comes to bond. He has to look at not only the safety of our victims, but he also has to look at safety for the community, and also whether or not they're going to stay around or flee. Obviously, with Alyssa, we knew that he had followed her around. We knew that he had shown up to places that she didn't invite him. We knew that he showed up at that night and without an invite and did what he did. So we knew all the facts. We made sure that the judge understood, we don't think this guy is going to stop if he were to be let out. So with that, he never got a bond. He sat in jail the duration of his case, which helped her, I believe, kind of be able to succeed with him being in there and him being behind bars, and there's that safety net. So, and the rest of it kind of us came in. So he got charged with sodomy and attempted sodomy first, domestic assault, and burglary first. Of all the survivors that I've worked with, she was one that showed tremendous strength throughout the whole entire process. She knew what she wanted to ask when she asked it. We went through everything that we needed to go through. If she had any, she knew she can contact me at any point in time. And with every single time she went into that courtroom, you can tell that she was getting stronger and stronger and stronger, up to the time where he pled. When he finally pled to that 12, 12, 7. When that happened, we brought her in beforehand and talked to her. One of the things that we make sure, especially in crimes like this, is we want to make sure that we have the victim, their impact. We want to know what they want. Dustin wants to know, our prosecutor wants to know what the victim wants to see done in the long run. And he takes those things into consideration. We sat down and we had a few meetings with Alyssa before we went and did that plea. And you could, when the time came and he finally pled, you can see the relief. You know, and it's done. You know, and it's not that it's done to the point where she's like, all right, I'm good. There's still going to be some healing. There's a healing process, but it was the relief and the weight on her shoulders was just kind of, it was released. And she still amazes me every day. She's still strong. She does the things that she does. She doesn't let anything hold her back. And a lot of times people, especially when in something like this that happened, so horrific, sometimes people try to hold themselves back, but she doesn't. She goes out, she lives her life, she lives her best life, and I think that's amazing.
We got this, girl.
Are we supposed to smile?
I think
That
so.
was your team.